Seema here. I'm one of the 3 co-organizers of Divi NYC. We already met Mickey Dina. Patty Rose is not feeling well. And our guest today is Rosalinda Huck. She's joining us from California, Sacramento area. She's a former co-organizer of Divi Sacramento Meetup. I had the privilege of attending many of her fabulous presentations, and you are deeply missed. I learned a lot during all those meetups. And she is a freelance front-end web designer. She's a long-term contractor with Marketing by Design. She started working in web design in 2015 after completing her degree in web design and interactive media. Since then, she's been designing in WordPress, different themes, including Divi. She has a passion for creating effective user experience, employing accessibility practices and standards, and helping clients with brand content and branding. I'll hand it over to Rosalinda. She'll take the questions if you have any questions after her presentation, and she'll share her email if you're not able to cover her questions. But I guess we can. And over to Rosalinda. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Seema. Thank you, Mickey, for inviting me to present today. As Seema mentioned, until recently, I was a co-organizer for Divi Sacramento, so I feel like I never left the role being here today. But I am so happy to join you and to be able to present on this topic, which is building a nonprofit website in Divi. Just before I go on, show of hands, how many people here have built or are currently building a website for a nonprofit? If you can wave at me or raise your hand or, okay. And how many have never worked on a nonprofit site? Okay, so a couple. Okay. I'm going to cover quite a bit of information today. So it might be a lot for some of you if you've not worked on a nonprofit site. Some of it is also very applicable to basically any website that you're going to work on, because a lot of it is just general web knowledge that you want to apply to any website that you're working on. And as Seema said, if you could hold your questions till the end, just because as I'm talking, my thoughts go quickly and I want to make sure I cover all the information. Feel free to put them in the chat, and then we can fill them at the end. I will have my email at the end too, if you want to just get a hold of me and ask me other questions that we didn't cover in today's presentation. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see that? Excellent. Okay, so building a nonprofit website with Divi. So what makes a nonprofit website different from other sites? There are a few things. For one, nonprofits are typically charities that have a 501(c)(3) taxes exempt status. So they're not commercial businesses that are necessarily focused on selling products or services. They are a nonprofit, meaning that they are in existence because of some sort of cause. So their focus is on a particular cause, and they rely mostly on donations to keep their organization afloat, working, that type of thing. So donations can come in lots of different forms, whether it's just asking for straight donations. A lot of times they'll have fundraisers, different types of fundraisers, and charity type events. So it's different from just a basic regular commercial business. Sometimes the main website, what we think of as the main website, is the parent website, and then they'll have lots of different satellite sites or sister sites or like local chapter type of sites. So it might be a big umbrella type of organization with lots of little sites underneath them. And depending on how that's set up, some of those sites might need to be set up differently. In some cases, It could be just separate sites, or it could be like a multi-site situation. So a nonprofit in that respect can be quite large, or they can be teeny tiny, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. Nonprofit sites can end up being heavyweight sites, and what I mean by that is lots of text, lots of images, lots of interactive elements, including plugins that you may or may not need to think about, and probably lots of links, meaning external links. And I'll show you one example later on. But essentially, they're kind of their own breed. Nonprofits are compared to regular business or commercial site. What are some types of nonprofits? We all pretty much are familiar with them. We may not realize that all of them are necessarily nonprofits, but there are wildlife organizations, environmental or climate associated or focused associations, organizations, those that are focused on social justice or advocacy of some sort on behalf of different groups of people, or even the animals or the environment, animal rescues, and other special causes that are not necessarily of one thing or another. I mean, it could be even something as simple as, someone in the community who knits sweaters for rescue animals. That could be a nonprofit. It could be pretty much anything, but it just is backed by some specific cause. Some well-known profits that you've probably heard of. I've taken 3, and these are just screenshots of their home pages that are mostly above the fold, what's considered above the fold. So World Wildlife Fund, they are focused on nature conservation. You probably can recognize them by their logo. It's the panda. Sierra Club is another one that they focus on wildlife and environment. And then American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, it's mostly what they're known, what you would call them as is ACLU, but they focus on civil rights advocacy. So those are just a few examples, and I'm going to show you some real life examples that kind of correspond to these examples in a minute. So general prep work and considerations if you're going to be building a nonprofit website. It's really not terribly different from building any other website, but there are other very specific considerations that you're going to want to think about, especially if you've never built a nonprofit website before. Just because nonprofits run a little bit differently from a commercial business. And anything that you would consider for any other website, you would still consider for a nonprofit site. It's just these are certain considerations that I feel make nonprofits stand out a little bit more. First one is the client budget. And I'm saying, is it worth your time and expertise? The reason that I say this is because nonprofits tend to have a board of directors that need to make the decisions on a lot across everything, and that includes what goes on a website. So if you are building a new site for a nonprofit, that board is probably going to have a lot of say in what can and can't go on that site, and it's not like it's a quick decision. They typically have meetings, and so it just depends on when they have those meetings and how extensively they talk about certain bullet points regarding the website. You may not get an answer for a while on certain aspects of the site, so just know that it can take a while to get a definitive yes or no. And in a lot of cases, they will say yes, but. So there's going to be conditions that they might decide that they want. So yeah, we want this, but can you do it this way? And it may or may not jive with your vision, or perhaps even something that is good for the site, meaning functionality, the functionality of it, or the accessibility, it might not, play well. So you're going to have to take into consideration the fact that it might take some time to get the answers, which therefore means, are you going to want to do the work based on the budget that they put out? Because the board is also going to want to try and stick to this particular budget. And a lot of times it's not huge. Not saying that a commercial site has, someone with a commercial site or that wants a commercial site has a huge budget, but nonprofits in particular are going to try and stick in a very certain range. And so some of the things that you might be thinking that you could do for the site, they may either say, nope, we don't want that, or nope, we can't have that, we can't afford that, that kind of thing. So just kind of consider whether it is something that you want to take on. It also is going to reflect on what services that you can provide. So if it is just you that is working on a site, then you're the only one that is going to consider this budget. But if you got other people that are also going to be working on the site, if you have a separate person that's working with you that does specifically graphics or specifically is your developer or whatever, you kind of need to consider that as well. How much are they going to be paying you? And is it something that is worth collectively all of your time and your expertise? Then can you deliver the ask? This is, again, one of those things, if they're asking for a lot and it involves things that you don't have any knowledge of, you might need to bring somebody else on to help you. If you're not already working for an agency or within a company that has somebody on staff that can cover that particular need, then you might need to hire a contractor to do something very specific. With me, I work with a small business, and we do have other contractors besides myself that focus on other things that are not in my scope of knowledge. So we have somebody that specifically can deal with writing extra JavaScript if that's necessary. We have somebody that can deal with if they need a rebrand, then she does all the rebranding, the logos, things like that. So you need to consider that as well. And depending on how large this the nonprofit is, that's going to tell you, kind of give you an idea of how long it might take to work on this project. So you may also have other projects in the works, and you kind of need to consider that as well. Are you going to be able to deliver the final product, not just the final product, but anything that you establish along a timeline? Are you going to be able to do that? Knowing that it might take a while with them because of the board of directors, because of their budget, all that sort of stuff. And then what they need right now versus what can be added later. This is kind of something that we've done with our clients because, again, it goes back to budget, or it might be a specific function that is just going to take longer. So maybe we put something else in place right now and then revisit it later down the road and really beef it up. So if budget is an issue, you could work with them on what is absolutely needed right now and what can be added later. Again, you might be able to just kind of put in a bare bones sort of feature and then go back and fill in all the details later on. If budget is a big issue, you might just say that's probably not something that we can do now because they can't afford you to spend the time to implement something. So maybe that just does not get implemented whatsoever. And then maybe next year, maybe they will want to have that added in. Can you be firm with your deliverables? And what I mean by that is in any project, you definitely want to establish some sort of timeline as to when things are going to, when parts of the site are going to be available for them to review. This is how we do it. So we'll say this section of the site, it'll be ready for you guys to look at, but it's not going to be completely done. It's not the final piece yet, but it gives you an idea. It'll give them an idea of what direction we've gone with it. So we establish a certain timeline. A lot of times our work is dependent on when they can get us the stuff that we need. So a lot of that is content. I mean, it's content, it's images, it might be blog posts even. It could be videos, it could be anything that needs to go in the site. If we're not producing it for them, then they need to be able to provide that to us. Sometimes they just need a lot of prodding. And there might be one point person in their team that can handle all the due dates and say, yes, we're going to get this to you here. I've got this file for you, or whatever the case is. It's helpful if there is one point person on their team that can be the person that you are in contact with and keep the project going. But can you be firm with it? Because a lot of times they might, oh, okay, yeah, we'll get it to you. And then you don't get the thing until a month later, and that's held you back from production. And time is money, right? So if you're not producing, then that site is going to stall, the build is going to stall, and then either you're not going to get paid, however it is, whichever way that you're getting paid, if you're getting paid in chunks every now and then, or if you're invoicing them every couple of weeks or every however so often, that's not going to happen. So if you can be firm with the deliverables, then great. If you think you might have a hard time with that, then it might be hard for you to work. And I'm not saying that all nonprofits are going to be that way. It's just that that can happen. And it has happened. And so you just kind of need to be on it. You just need to really stay on top of a certain schedule or a timetable. If the site is a redesign, a complete redesign, what you want to do is make sure that you are understanding what it is that they want, if they know what they want. Sometimes they don't know what they want, and all they say, we just want it redesigned. We just want a new look. Great. What is that? What do you think that new look should be? Oh, I don't know. And it's like, it's kind of like it's a give and take. So if it is a redesign, really get a good understanding of what it is that they're going for. We always ask clients, whether they're nonprofit or not, can you give us examples of websites in your industry that you particularly like, with that have features that you like, or for whatever reason you really like the layout of that site, or maybe there's certain pages on the site that you really want to try and emulate on your site, and be clear about what it is that they like about those things. And then if it's not a redesign and it's completely new, there is a chance that you may actually have to work with branding. If they don't have any sort of branding, or maybe if their branding is all over the place, you do not want to build a nonprofit site that has branding that makes no sense. That might have a certain color palette on certain pages, but not on other pages, or that have all sorts of different fonts and typography going on. You need it to, like any website, you want it to be cohesive. So if there is no branding, you may have to think about that. Are you able to work on branding with them? Is that something that they might need to go away and work on with somebody else, and then come to you for a website? If you can do it, great. Just know that you're gonna need to build in more time for that website. It's not just going to be the website. Now you're needing to work on branding, and that's a separate thing. That's a pre-build sort of thing. So that's another big consideration. So what types of things are included on a typical nonprofit site? Like I said, it's not too much different from what the things that you might find on a regular commercial website, but there are, again, other things. So one, donations. I mentioned in the beginning, nonprofit is a 501(c)(3). They are a charity of some sort. They're not in business for themselves. They are working for a cause. And so in order to stay afloat, they need donations. And so somewhere on the site, and very prominently on the site, you're probably going to need something that where they can accept donations, or that will funnel them into something else for donations that's external from the website. I will show you an example on one of our client sites for this, because a lot of times this is going to require a plugin. One such plugin that's popular is called Give WP. Our clients currently, we have a few nonprofit sites. None of them are using a plugin because they already had an existing way of collecting donations that they wanted to keep. So they didn't want to implement any new process. They wanted to stick with what they were already using. So there are no plugins on any of our client sites for donations specifically. Those donation links go either externally, actually they all go externally to something else, whether it's PayPal or some other external platform or way of collecting money. It's just how they chose to operate. So if it's maybe if it's a completely brand new nonprofit, and basically a startup nonprofit, then that might be something to consider or to show them. So you may want to learn, how Give WP works, or how whatever other donation plugin that you come across that seems to play well with Divi specifically. Side note, if you're going to build a Divi site, the thing that I like to do if I am needing a plugin is to first research Divi, I should say plugins that play well with Divi or that are made specifically for Divi. Those are my go-tos first. And there are several developers out there that do that have created plugins, developed plugins that are specifically for the Divi builder. Then I would go and find whatever is the most popular, the most reliable, just WordPress plugin if I don't see one that's made specifically for Divi. But that is always been kind of helpful to do, just so that you know that it's compatible with Divi. So donations is one. Okay. Contact forms are another. And I will show you on this other site too that the forms are a lot. And there are two different plugins that I am familiar with. One is the one I'm most familiar with is Formidable. And okay, so if you know Divi, you know that there is a contact form module. You also know that it's very bare bones. There's not a whole lot of weight to it. So I think we only use it in instances where a client wants literally the simplest contact form. They don't want a plugin. They don't want anything like that. And if the Divi contact form module works and does the job, then great. But in the nonprofit cases, they need something that has a little bit more oomph to it. Whether it's the ability for people to upload files to send to them, or to connect to something like MailChimp. If it requires a little bit more functionality, then our go-to is Formidable Forms. The other one that I know of that works well, that tends to be popular, is Gravity Forms. If you are not familiar with either of these, I would go check those out. There are other form plugins as well that are popular. I know Contact 7, I think, is one. But Formidable and Gravity in particular are also accessibility friendly. And I am an advocate of accessibility. So any plugin that you use that also helps with accessibility and doesn't hinder it on your website is a good thing. So those two I know are good for that. And the next thing would be events and or a calendar of events. So whether that's a listing of events or an actual calendar. If you're going the calendar route, you're going to need another plugin. The one that I recommend is the Events Calendar. I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm sure you've probably seen it. It's very popular. The reason that is a great one is because there are extensions that are Divi specific that you can integrate with the events calendar. You can thank PA Creative for that. Nelson over at PA Creative has created lots of different stuff that you can use for your Divi site. One of them that we've used is the one for his calendar. Why is it escaping me now what it's called? If anybody knows off the top of their head, please put it in the chat. But it is helpful. And again, because it's Divi friendly, you know, you're kind of set up already for success in that way. Events again can come in the form of like the charity events, fundraising events, that kind of thing. And sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes they might just need a list of here's what's coming up. Like for instance, one of the sites that I'm going to show you, it has to do with there might be some legislative advocacy type things on the docket, and so they want people to know when those events or those dates are coming up. So it's just a literal list of events. Let's see. Next would be some sort of mission statement, philosophy, what they stand for. That's a big one for nonprofits. This can take up an entire section of the site. And when I say section, I'm talking about in your navigation, it's probably one of your top navigation links. And then within that, there's probably a bunch of sublinks or subpages that have to do with their mission or philosophy or something like that. That can be a big part of the site. Social media is another one. Most everybody, whether you're nonprofit or not, has some sort of social media account. And sometimes it's multiple platforms. It could be just one. And so, you know, that you might need to figure out, what does that mean? Does it mean that it is just simply a follow us on Facebook? Or is it the type of thing where they want people to have the ability to share the content that they're looking at? PA Creative, again, has a great plugin for that, and it's called the Divi Social Share Buttons. We do use this on a couple of our sites because our client wanted people to be able to blast certain things on their social media, so this was the way to do it. And so I know that I think I've only used it once, but in Elegant Themes, there's also somebody help me out. Is it Monarch? Is it Monarch? Okay. Monarch. I think we did implement it once, and then we didn't use it again just because something happened with the site and we ended up not working with it anymore. But that's another feature. If you have Elegant Themes, if you have a license, you can go use Monarch. That's another way to do the social share. Okay. Image galleries are another thing. Now, you may or may not have already come across this with whatever website you worked on, but clients don't always have the best images. I know when during our Divi meetups for Sacramento, the subject would always come up of images because it's a hot topic. Images are a huge part of any website, but with a nonprofit especially, it provides that visual anchor of what they're about. So if they don't have any images whatsoever, how is somebody going to really fully understand what they do? And in some cases, they might hand you files, loads, in fact, of images, but none that are terribly useful because they might be teeny tiny. They could be low res, very blurry. It might be old. It might be a really old image that happened like 10 years ago that might not be relevant for, decent enough to put on a site now. So that's something that you're going to need to work with them on, whether it's, okay, is this the case where we're just going to need to get some stock images? That might be the case. Or perhaps you just kind of put up, only just a sprinkling of images that are the best of the crop that they have now. And then as things happen with them, you let them know, here's what we need for this site moving forward. If you guys are able to have somebody be in charge of taking some good high res images, then we can start putting those on the site piecemeal. That's another way. But images are not always going to be the best. There are certain cases where maybe they have a photographer. It's possible. If they're a big enough organization, they might actually have somebody that's available to do the photography for them, or is volunteering time to do photography. So that might be a case. And if so, that's aces. So just know that they might want an image gallery, even if they don't have the best images. It happens, but you kind of have to work with what you got. Along with that, you're going to want to make sure that whatever images you put in, you clean them up and you compress them as much as you can. So if they are high res, compress. Make sure the resolution is good. Make sure that the crop and the size are good. Cropping is super important too, because if you've got all this stuff in there that's not necessary, you want to focus on subject matter and how it relates to the content. The other bit is making sure that you include alt text. I'm going to pause here and just kind of side note. I'm always going on my soapbox about accessibility. If you know me and if you sat in on any of our past meetups, you know that I'm going to talk about accessibility, especially when it comes to images. Does everybody know what alt text is? If not, it's fine. Alt text is basically the explanation of the image that you put in with the image file. So if you go into Divi, you actually need, if you're using an image module, you need to go into the image module, into advanced, into attributes. I believe it's called attributes. And there's a place to put alt text. This is where you're going to want to put a description of the image. The example that you always like to use is, let's say that it is a picture of a dog sitting on a couch. The worst thing that you could do is, worst thing you could do is not put any alt text. And the reason alt text is important is because if somebody's using a screen reader, and maybe it's somebody who is blind, maybe it's somebody who has a sight impairment, so they cannot see the image, they will rely on their screen reader to tell them, what is this image? And is it relevant to the content? So if it is a dog that is sitting on a couch, you don't want to just say dog. You need to give a little bit more. Imagine if you close your eyes and an image popped up. Would it help you to visualize what does dog mean? Is it a big dog? Is it a little dog? Is it a puppy? Is it an old dog? What color is the dog? What kind of dog is it? Is it sitting down? Is it laying down? Is it begging? What is it doing? So you kind of need to give context. And especially with if it's situated, if an image is on a page, normally it's because it's important to the content. So if the dog is on the page, maybe it's an animal shelter. Maybe you want to make sure you have a good description of what's going on within that image, so that somebody that's using some sort of assistive device can understand, oh, okay, yeah, they deal with dogs who have special needs. This dog has 3 legs. This dog is missing an eye, that kind of thing. I'm going to get off my soapbox now for that. Okay. The last thing here, blogs and or videos. That's another big part. Like with any site, you're going to want to see if they want to put a blog in. If there are a couple scenarios, they might not have one if it's an existing site and they're just going for a revamp or a redesign. Maybe they want to start one. And so you'll probably need to figure out, what does that look like? How extensive is the blog? Can it just be can you just use the regular WordPress post? Or do you need to create more custom post types? Custom post types are a whole nother thing. So maybe it is a case where they're going to be needing a bunch of different custom post types, not just posts. In our case, I will show you, we are using lots of custom post types, and it's just to be able to differentiate what all the different posts are on the site instead of just using categories, because that's a little bit different. Using a taxonomy is a little bit different from your custom post types. Okay. So examples of real nonprofit sites using Divi. These are sites that I have been involved in, and in some form or fashion, whether it was super extensively or not. And so the first example, if we don't get to the second one, that's fine, because this first one is probably the juiciest one. So the first one is called Housing California, and their focus is on homelessness and affordable housing advocacy. If you wanted to go ahead and pop in their URL, you can. It's housingca.org. I will show it on my screen though, so I'm going to start sharing this one and start sharing a different one. Oops, yeah, okay. Okay, can you all see that? Okay. So Housing California, just realized I moved away from the slide that I wanted to show you, but that's okay. You don't really need to see the slide. So the key features in this, my involvement was design, UX or user experience, and development. So basically from beginning to end, helping with the design, helping with user experience, accessibility included, and then the development, meaning the actual build. There are several pages that I will show you on this. So let's just look at the donate real quick, because that was one thing. You'll see that donate is actually way up here in the secondary nav, and what's the main call to action, the two main calls to action really are take action and policy agenda, because they are into the advocacy and the they also have people on staff who lobby. It's more about taking action than it is about donations, even though they do have that on their site, and it is something that they do through specific means. It's more about the action and what's going on and what they're working towards. So the policy agenda changes every year. It has to do with different laws that they are vying for. And then take action is just kind of an action center where they can direct people to take action on this. There's this bill that write to your senator or whatever, and that's kind of the main area for that. But looking at the homepage, there are numerous sections. So what they want is for people to take some sort of action. So that's at the top. And then comes the news, and these have to do with posts. So these are different custom post types within the umbrella of news. This is an Instagram widget. It used to be a Twitter widget, but when Twitter was going through their whole existential crisis, some of you may have experienced it. The Twitter widget was wonky for the longest time. So they decided, no, let's just switch it out for our Instagram instead. So we just pulled the widget code from Instagram and plopped it here instead. I didn't do anything extra to that. And then, some of the things that they care about. So again, what is it that they're about? Homelessness, housing affordability. These all link to those specific pages. They've got a lot of quotes on their site as well. Buttons that are not buttons. Do you guys know about buttons and accessibility? A button should be something that you click and a modal pops up. A link just goes to something, and that has to do with accessibility. So a button does something and a link just goes somewhere. So just make sure that you know that difference. And these are links that look like buttons. And then lots of images. This also is one of their sister site. Well, sort of a sister site. It's a site that they also have under their umbrella. So again, when I talked in the beginning how there might be a main site and then there's like maybe these offshoots that are related, this is one of their sites. And then this I also want to talk about because it's actually a mini site within this site. So instead of building another satellite site that connects to this site, we decided, okay, well, we'll just keep this whole thing in the site, but it's going to look like a mini site, if that makes any sense. Okay. So if we look at donate, now their donate, I said before, is not a plugin, but it does go somewhere. So these are forms. This goes to a formidable form because some of their patrons need to pay by check still. So if you click on that, then it'll go to a formidable form. However, other forms on their site come from somewhere else, and it's an external platform that they have been using for a long time, and it's geared for emails, creating emails, as well as campaigns, and basically a way to get people to do something, take action. So for that, this is another different type of form. It is not formidable though. This is actually an embed that I had to pull from that platform, stick it in a code module, and then I had to apply CSS to make it cohesive with the site because it wasn't looking right. It wasn't using the same typography or anything like that. So it needed to have the same look to appear that, you know, maybe it is using the same type of form. So that's forms. CPTs, let's look at that real quick. CPTs meaning custom post types. That's for the news section. So within the news, there's news, and then there's statements, and then there's newsletters, and then updates. These are not necessarily all, these are all different things. News is different from, we had to figure this out. There's a lot to figure out with this. News is very different from statements. So if you click on news, you'll go to the archive page. Now, I use the Divi Builder, the theme builder, to do all the archive pages and all the post pages for all the custom post types. That's something else that you're gonna want to consider as well. So this is the archive page. I'd set it to, I forget however many, I think it's 6 posts. And then when you click on one of these, it'll go to the actual post. Here at the bottom, remember that share from PA Creative, that's what this is. So this is a share thing. And up here, we actually manually added this to say, okay, go back. If you click on statements, that's a completely different post type. And statements are different from news in that they're talking more about like their press releases. A lot of times it has to do with their press releases. So it's a different thing than just regular news. And again, because this is done in the Divi theme builder, it's always going to be at the bottom. And then this is always going to be at the top. Okay, let's see what's another one. Okay, so a mini site within a site. This is a section under their umbrella of Housing California, of actual residents. It's called Residents United Network, who advocate for housing affordability, all that. So this could have been a whole separate site, but we came to the conclusion together collectively that it's better if we just keep it within the main site, but make it look like it's its own site. So it has its own color palette, it has its own styling, and this is carried throughout all of the pages that are associated with Run. So you'll see that I used more rounded everything here. They have a motif going, which is the sunburst thing. So I use that in lots of different places. And then also use the Run colors of blue. Another thing you want to make sure you want to consider is that if you are doing branding with them, that their colors can translate nicely to an accessible color palette, because this lighter blue is not necessarily accessible when you put white text on it, or if you put certain things. So I had to change the hex number a little bit to make it a little bit more accessible. But basically, that's that. Their sign up is also an external. This is not Formidable. This is not any plugin. It's coming from their external platform that was embedded. And then a calendar for them is not a calendar. It's just a list, and it's not been updated. They haven't had any updates lately. So it's the same thing actually in the main area of the site where there is a list of legislative dates. It's just a list of dates. There is no calendar on this, no actual like plugin type thing. Other plugins that are being used on this site, the Divi dashboard welcome, which is in the back end, and I am not going to show you that bit, but it does kind of customize the back end for them so that they realize, oh, this is our site, and you know, we customize it with, here are our contact number, contact information in case you need it, that sort of thing. Here are the most relevant pages that you might want to be working on, that kind of thing. We are using Yoast for SEO. Excuse me. We all are also using Relevancy, which is not a Divi thing, but Relevancy it helps with the search. So the search bar up here. So if you were to type in policy, we had to do a lot of customization with this as well, though, to make it accessible friendly. But the Relevancy will highlight every instance of that keyword in everything that it pulls up, so that they can see what am I looking for again, and then maybe they need to narrow down their search a little bit. So that is another plugin that we're using. We also have actually quite a bit of custom JavaScript that we had to add here and there, as well as a few things for accessibility, such as ARIA labels. And those are prevalent on the inner. It is still doing policy. I don't want you to highlight policy anymore. Anyway, so if we go to one of these, you see this navigation. This is something that we also handcrafted and inserted on all the pages in lieu of breadcrumbs. You can use breadcrumbs, that's fine, but we wanted to use something else instead. But we did have to add ARIA labels to help with the accessibility aspects, so that screen users would understand that this is navigation, because this is navigation and this is navigation. So if we didn't add ARIA labels, it would not identify this as any sort of navigation, and that's not a good thing, because you want a screen reader to identify if it's a navigation or not. The other thing that you'll notice on this site is that we don't use drop downs, and that has to do with the accessibility. There is no perfect builder out there that is 100% accessible. There also is no theme that is in WordPress that is 100% accessible. So you're going to need to do something to help your site be more accessible if you can't just make it accessible. So with the navigation, unfortunately, if you were to look at this mobile-wise, it's not necessarily accessible. It has a tendency to screen readers have a hard time navigating through the mobile version. And so we wanted to try to avoid that by not using drop downs. So instead we create what we call index pages for everything. So each one of these top navs, except for contact, is what's called an index page, meaning any sub pages that would fall in that section are links on that page. So if you go to policy, you know what, let's go to our work instead. It's actually, that one was a special case. So our work has technically seven links within it, or subpages. So you could go to policy advocacy, multi-sector coalitions, and then you'll see that they can see, oh, I'm on this page. Okay, cool. And I'm going down the page now, and that's great. What else is under here? They can easily just go to those pages through what we call the page navigation. What else am I wanting to show you on here? I think that was it for that one. And just because I don't want to go over time, I'm gonna skip the other site, but this one has a lot of stuff on it. Now, this nonprofit, as we were building it, it was kind of their old site was done not in WordPress. And it was one of those do-it-yourself type builders. So we had to, it was a bit of everything. It was a bit of a rebranding. It was a bit of a complete redesign. The user experience was totally different because they wanted to go in a different direction and their focus was different. And then they also wanted to create these other sites to go with it. So those are the sites that I want to show you now. So the annual conference site is another site. This one is not as exciting because there's not a whole lot on it. And the reason is because the stuff on the site changes so much. They have an annual conference that happens every year. And so every year, this site goes through a lot of changes, and it's happening right now. I mean, they're gearing up for the 2024 conference. So you'll see nothing mostly but text and links on this site. But as you can see, the colors are pretty much the same. And the reason for that, and the reason that this is not a special logo, is because it changes every year. The graphics change every year. The logo for the conference changes every single year. So because they are the ones hosting it, it was better to just leave their logo in as the main logo. And then this will change. Probably by the end of the year, or maybe early next year, this will actually have some sort of graphic on it that goes with the theme, because every year it's a different theme. So you can see that it links back to the main page or main website. And then these are the pages that are visible now, but I can tell you right now, there's like 5 more pages that are going to go up here as the conference comes closer. So one of the pages, for instance, that changes quite a bit are the sponsors. These are going to be different all the time, and it's going to be added to. There's a bunch more sponsors that are going to be added to these different lists. So that's why it's mostly just text and links, not a whole lot of imagery. Their other site, they actually have 3 other sites, but I'm just showing you 2. This is Roadmap 2030. This site was interesting because we did originally do a website for them, and then they decided that they wanted another company to take the website because they were their expertise was on campaigning, and that's not what we do. So they had them redo the site. This is the look of it. What happened was that it ended up coming back to us, but they needed it to come off of the platform that company had built, and then we rebuilt it in Divi. So the first iteration of the site was a Divi site, and then it went to them, to the other company, and then they rebuilt it on their platform. And then when it came back to us, they still wanted to keep most of the same stuff and the same look and the same feel. So our job was to rebuild the whole thing in Divi and then change some of the pages later. There are a few style changes that needed to be made because it wasn't going to happen in Divi. So I would say that this site is a good 90 to 95% what it was before we brought it back to Divi. So if you ever have that challenge come up, you can do it. You can pretty much build a site in Divi copying something else. It may not be 100%, but it's going to be darn close. You can do that, and that is the magic of the Divi builder. Just being able to use the different modules in certain ways. So this site, again, it's a lot about, it has to do with homelessness, has to do with housing affordability, but it is a separate thing from the main site. The colors aren't necessarily, the palette's not necessarily the same, but they are linked. So if you go to the main site, you're going to see the link to this site. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing that. Go back to my slides. So the last bit that I want to get into, I appreciate you guys for hanging in. I know this is a lot of information. I'm trying to not forget anything. Okay. Are you guys seeing that? Okay. So building a nonprofit website in Divi, some helpful tips. Now we're getting kind of into the nitty-gritty of Divi itself. First, though, create a strong plan of attack. This kind of goes back to the beginning. Make sure you have a firm understanding of the project, design, content, scope, etc. Don't skip this. If you don't have a good plan in the beginning, you're going to have a hard time later on. This really goes with any website build, but especially with a nonprofit, because let me tell you, the board, whoever is in charge, they're going to change their minds a lot. And you're going to need to know how to roll with those changes. You're going to need to have plan B, plan C, all the way through plan Z in your back pocket in case something, gets completely changed, or they decide they don't want that. They want this now. You're going to need to know where to look and how much time it's going to take for you to do whatever it is that the ask is. Create wireframes. If you're not familiar with wireframing, there's lots of ways to do it. It doesn't really have to be anything fancy. A wireframe is basically just a blueprint of what a page will look like. We tend to do very stylized wireframes. We used to do them in Photoshop, but now we tend to just do them straight in Divi. And you can save a layout to your Divi library. You can save a layout to the Divi cloud. That's the beauty of using Divi anyway. So you can save. You mash the two layouts together. I don't know. But they can be low tech, high tech. Some people use Figma. Some people use Canva. Some people just use just a drawing on paper to show them, this is how the layout would look. This is where all your content would go, that kind of thing. But the most important thing is understanding is your wireframe going to show your client the vision, the overall vision? Is it translating? That's what you want to get across in your wireframe. That's why a wireframe is important. And it will save you so much time later too. Paying special attention to the navigation and hierarchy. Excuse me. You saw that in the main site that I showed you. There's a lot going on with pages. And we went through lots of different versions of this page should go with this group. No, it makes more sense to go with this group. So user experience is very important. And the reasoning why somebody would click on that. Why, if I'm so-and-so, where would I expect to find this sort of information, that kind of thing. If you can have that hashed out in the beginning, that's the best, especially if there are a lot of pages, and nonprofits can have lots of pages. So just make sure you've got that set. And the same thing with secondary navs and footer links. Sometimes they're not the same. So I'll take that into consideration as well. Okay, using a child theme, even if you think you don't need one. If you're not familiar with child themes, Elegant Themes actually has a blog. And I'm gonna, actually, I can't grab it. Why am I can't grab it. It's on their blog. And if you just Google like Divi child theme, one of the blogs actually, they'll tell you, they spell out exactly what goes into a child theme, a basic child theme, and they even give you a template for it. It's great. It's helpful. All it is really just a blank CSS file, a functions file. What am I forgetting? I think that's it. If you don't think that you're going to need it, just put one in anyway. It doesn't hurt to have a child theme already set in there. We've had it happen where we weren't needing a functions PHP file. We didn't need it. And then one day, oh, look, we need it. And we actually got to go and throw one in. So just do that anyway, especially if you think you're going to be doing a lot of CSS. Then, you know, outside of that, it's nice to have that external CSS file. Get familiar with CSS, speaking of. If you do not know CSS, you don't have to be an expert, but it does help to know some of the basics because Divi can only handle so much. So if you're going to go into a module and change the settings because you want it to reflect, you know, I want to use, I want to make sure it's using a certain point size or whatever. A lot of that you can actually do in your child theme. And actually, I highly recommend that you do that. It's what we typically do. We will use the CSS file, external CSS file for our core global styles, meaning all of our headings. Maybe there are certain things with links, certain ways that we want them to appear, even images, anything that's on a global scale that you don't want to always have to monkey using the settings within a Divi module. Do it in your child theme in the CSS file. That's going to save you so much time. You can always go back and add or use like the global modules. You can always add, you can always make use of the global colors, more global, the general global modules, all that later on. But if you have the core stuff already set, then it saves you so much time down the road. And then making it accessible as possible. Again, not everything is 100% accessible within WordPress. WordPress itself is not 100% accessible. So figure out what can make your site stronger. Adding the WP accessibility plugin is one way to do it. That's a good one. And then making sure that your colors, you know, the basic things that you would for any website really, that making sure that your colors are accessible, that your images have alt text, that your headings are clear, that there is a hierarchy, that your links are clear, all that sort of thing. Just whatever you can to make it accessible, because then the reach of the audience will be wider that way. And who doesn't want a wider reach for their audience when it comes to their website? Okay, now attack. Become best friends with the Divi Builder. I showed you what I use the Divi Builder for in the main site for Housing California, and that was mostly for anything that had to do with a custom post type. So posts primarily saves a lot of time. If you don't know how to use the Divi Builder, take some time and just play with it because it's awesome. It saves so much time. And if you do all your styling and everything within that one template, you only have to go to that template ever to change anything if something comes up. You don't have to go to all the posts. It's just going to be automatically done within that one template for you. Use global anything and everything Divi has to offer. So again, this is the global modules, the colors, the presets, wherever you can use Divi to your advantage to save you time later on, especially with sections that are repeating the same sorts of things. You may end up using global modules and things like that in the Divi theme builder. So if you do that, if you use things in combination in that way, then you really are saving a lot of time later on. Using shortcuts, so hotkeys, you know, if you haven't already been using like Command C or Control C and then Command V or Control V, like you would in Microsoft Word or any other platform where you're doing any sort of formatting, you can do that in Divi. It's super simple and it helps. Any of the shortcut functions where you can just duplicate something and then edit the text in there. Using the extend function, if you go into the settings of a module and you need to apply that one style that you did within that one text module to everything in that row or everything in that section, you can do that. You can just extend the same styles instead of having to do each one individually and change those styles, because that can be time consuming. You can just simply extend those styles and then duplicate modules wherever. I duplicate a lot. What I tend to do is I will fix up one module, like let's say I need to do a 3-column module or a 3-column row, and basically all the columns are going to look the same. I'm just going to style up one text module, get it the way I want, get approval for it, and then I'm going to copy it and then, or duplicate it, and then just go in and edit the image or edit the link or whatever it is to save time later on. And then saving those things in the Divi library and also the Divi cloud. If you've not tested out the cloud yet, this is a time saver, especially in instances like this client that we have that has multiple sites. I've had to use certain things on all sites, so it helps to just throw it in the cloud and then I can pull it into this other site. That's what the cloud is useful for. The Divi library I still use all the time if I want to create something, create a layout, and I want to save it. I'm not going to necessarily use it, but I want to save it and come back to it later. Or if there's a specific module that I heavily customize and I don't want to lose it, then I'll save that into the cloud, or I'm sorry, the library. And then labeling everything. I mean, everything, especially if you're saving things into the library or the cloud so that you know what it is. If there are different versions of something, put a date on it. Come up with a convention to label things. And then what I mean by label is label the text module, label the row, label the section. You know, those color coding blocks help. You can label, especially anything gray, you probably want to label because it's got some sort of text. If I'm just using one text module for a heading, I put what the heading is as my label. And then in the text, I might just use the first like 3 or 4 words and then ellipses, so I know what that paragraph was about. Or if I was creating a link, special link to something, then I would put links to blah, blah, blah. And then if I'm saving a particular module to the library, I know I've had a few versions of it already, I'm going to put the date at the end of it. So I might call it, about page CTA _ and then the date. But I want to make sure that I keep using that same convention for anything that I'm going to save again in the future. And then I promptly get rid of the old one if I don't need it. Because you don't want a cluttered library. That's not helpful for you at all. Okay, Divi layouts really quick. If you just want to get a quick start, you can use a Divi layout. Couple observations though. They're a good starting point. You can use them for inspiration. But don't just use the default settings. Always customize it. Do whatever you can to customize a site. You shouldn't just be using it straight out of the box. Customize it to whatever your client's needs are. And fix the heading hierarchy. This is a huge one. If you didn't already know, the Divi layouts have the preset layouts, and they tend to use a lot of the same modules on different various layouts. And I like to use the toggles as a example. Did you know that the default heading in those toggles is an H5, a heading 5? You can't do that on a web page if there isn't an H4, an H3, an H2, and H1 before that. Every page is always going to have an H1 no matter what. That is the page name, the page title. But there may not be an H2. There may not be an H3. So you can't have an H5 without that. So you need to go in and change in the settings. You need to change that from an H5 to an H whatever it is. An H2, and then style it to how you want that particular heading to look. Styles do not reflect the heading necessarily. So if you're using, a particular large font for all of your H2s, just because that toggle needs to be an H2 doesn't mean it has to look like that. It just needs to semantically say that it's an H2. And that is good for SEO, and that is good for accessibility. It's a must. If you're going to use a Divi layout, just make sure that you're checking the heading settings and making sure that they're correct in the hierarchy. Use what's useful, dump what's not. You don't have to use everything that's in the layout. There's no law that says that. So use what you can, what seems right, and then just get rid of what's not. Use the global features to save your newly edited layouts. So or use global features and save your layouts. So make sure that you're saving all the edits that you're doing somehow, that you're not losing that. Ask yourself if starting with a blank slate is better. So in some cases, maybe it's just better if you just do a build from scratch instead of using a layout. If it ends up being more work to have to edit an existing layout, then maybe you should just do your own from scratch. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you've already got a wireframe. And that is it. I know that we've come close to time. I want to make sure to squeeze everything in. There is my email if you need to get a hold of me. If you have other questions, feel free to email me there. And that is my final dance. The frog has done his dance. So thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Rosalinda. That was wonderful. I always learn something new from you. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any questions, Mickey?
I haven't seen any come across, but if anyone wants to open their mics and unmute themselves and ask a question, sure, Jean, go ahead.
I don't actually have a question, but I have a couple of comments because the last Drupal site that I managed for 5 years was for a nonprofit. I was the only communications person at a small nonprofit. So I had a couple of thoughts, just my personal experience. There's an organization called the Taproot Foundation that they took the idea of pro bono from the legal world and tried to apply it to other professions. And what they do is like put together teams of people, or you can volunteer and get matched with a nonprofit and do various things. So that's a good way to get some experience if you're interested in and don't have it. And also, help an organization that does something you care about. And also there's an organization called N10, NTEN, which is the Nonprofit Technology Network. You can like pay a membership and take classes and things like that. But I found we had no budget, like zero budget where I was working. They have forums that are excellent for referral, it's advice, questions. It's really a great organization. So that's another way that if you are working with a nonprofit or want to work with nonprofits, that's really a good organization to look at. And the other thing about images, I think nonprofits are more likely to be doing more than paying lip service to diversity stuff. And so if you're choosing images, things like, does it look like the Great White Savior handing the poor African kids something? It was a feminist organization that I was with, and one of their programs was getting women in non-traditional occupations like construction, and finding images of women doing things like that is really tough, or it was 5 years ago. So I think and I definitely do think the decision-making process can be much slower, because unless they're one of these huge national, international organizations, I think often the decision-making is less top-down than in a corporation, and more, the board has approval, or multiple people have to get involved, or it's a committee. And so those things can really make it big. And there are certain concerns, like if you're tax deductible, you have to post certain information about your finances on your site, or publicly. It has to be public. It doesn't have to be on your website, but that's the best way, easiest way to do it. And we used a CRM called, that was also open source, called Divi CRM. And so that's the kind of thing you might be linking to. Customer relationship management or a donor system, like a lot of them use Salesforce or things like that, to keep track of donors and volunteers and supporters, that kind of thing. So
Thanks, Jean. Thank you for the information. Rosalinda, I had one question. You mentioned something about plugins. Do you go to the Divi marketplace and look for them there, like which are compatible with Divi?
You can do that. I mean, my method is always, let's Google Divi, Divi plugin, and then whatever it is that I need. And a lot of times, the very well-known developers will pop up with something because a lot of them have something that's already compatible and cohesive with the Divi builder or the Divi theme. So sometimes if I want to get a good overview, I might look at the marketplace and see what is there currently, because developers will come out with new things every so often. But a lot of times I'll just kind of Google it and see what pops up. In the cases that don't pop up with something that's Divi specific, then my next go-to is what is most used then within the WordPress community.
Okay, thank you. Mickey, do you have any questions? We ready to wind up?
I think so. Any more questions for Rosalinda? I would just comment. I did raise my hand. The first big site I ever did was for an NGO that I got hooked up to through an organization like Jean was mentioning, N10, but it was a different organization, and it was a very different experience working with them. Very, very low budget, and they already had their donation platform, and just putting that all together was a little difficult. But just generally, this was a really great presentation. I appreciate it. And we're so happy to have you do this. And I hope everyone else got a lot of good information out of it.
Yeah.
And if there's no more questions, we'll call it an evening. And again, the recording will go up on our YouTube channel, which I believe is called Divi NYC, or you could search YouTube for Divi NYC and find the channel. So once again, thanks, Rosalinda. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Until next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.